You couldn't have gotten a bigger bed.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
You and I are last.
What are you?
I'm four. Scott and I are 3 and 4. I'm 4.
I know it was early.
I saw that.
No, you're 1.
Oh, okay.
All right.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Good numbers.
All right. All right, well, allow me to introduce Carl Fortuna. Carl is an attorney seeking his 3rd term as Old Saybrook First Selectman.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. Prior to serving as First Selectman, Carl served for 10 years as the Board of Finance and partly as the chairperson. He's a graduate of Boston College and Fordham University Law School.
Yep.
Carl Fortuna.
Thank you. So, everybody, thanks for coming out today. And, the first thing I want to say is, to a lot of people in this room, I had a loss in my family over the last, in the last week or so, but been dealing with that for over a month. And so many people in this room, at this table, on both sides of me, reached out to me. And I just want to say how much I appreciate that. I went through a difficult time, and it really shows what a great community we are. I mean, I'm looking around just about everybody in this room, in fact. So I just want to say that I appreciate that very much. It's been a real pleasure and privilege to serve over the last 4 years. I think we've gotten a lot done. I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to launch right in. One thing I think I've brought, and it's not primary, but it's one of the things that I'm most proud of, civility. Go to town meetings over before 4 years ago, and they were somewhat contentious and not always open for discussion. And one of the things that I was committed to right from day one was to have civility at our town meetings and at Board of Selectmen meetings, and I brought that. We've also brought conservative fiscal policies to town. Now, I keep hearing about a bump in the mill rate. Well, there was something called revaluation that occurred 2 years ago. And revaluation, basically, we lost 16% of our residential property values. So as a result of that, the mill rate went up approximately 16% on a lot of different properties, mostly commercial, actually. A lot of residences went down unless you were along the shoreline. But the budgets themselves, excluding bonding issues, have been, last year's budget was a 1% budget. The budget before that was a 2% budget. Raises for town employees have been state average or below, 2% to 2.25. Why are they getting raises? It's called collective bargaining. And you're not going to get away without giving your unions raises. So we bargained very fairly with our unions, but we've also kept the raises about where they should be. Bob knows this. We started a capital non-recurring fund a few years ago. You're hearing about some projects right now in town. You're hearing about the town hall boiler that broke. You're hearing about youth and family services needing a new boiler. Those are being paid for from funds that we started my last year on the Board of Finance, and we're committed to keep funding it so that the town has a savings account from which we can pay. And the town is in great fiscal health right now. Our rainy day fund is at probably the highest it's been in 10 years anyway, 8%.
Yeah, it's over 8%, yes.
So our fiscal policies have actually been very conservative. We have the 16th lowest mill rate, 16th or 18th lowest mill rate in the state, despite going through kind of a relatively nasty reval at not a very good time. Think back to 2009. How many of you were upset at how your property was assessed in 2009 because we caught you at the end of a boom? I remember this. In fact, we had a referendum on whether the reval should stick, and it did stick, because people were upset at how high their properties were being assessed. Well, then they came down, and it was reflected in the last reval. Our infrastructure, we've kept our infrastructure up to date. We built a new police department because we had to build a new police department. Dan Moran and John O'Brien served on that police building committee, by the way, which was 5 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And we did a good job with that building. We were paying $166,000 in rent. And now we have a police building that we're going to own. We're already 2 years into paying it off. And that's a 20-year bond. We did the Goodwin School windows, which is a project that's been on the table for probably 15 years. Talk to the principals and talk to the parents in that school. That is going to save on heating, and it's going to be great for the learning and the comfort of the students and the teachers. The 3T project, I'm proud of it. It's a great field. Not everybody voted for it. It's a great field, great tennis courts, great track. And it was something that was needed in this town because we need more fields, and this gives more field playing time. And we did it right. That's why there was a year's delay, because we did it right. Economic development, we've gotten all kinds of grants. We have North Main Street coming down the pike next year. We have a Brownfields grant. As Colin knows, serving on zoning, we're really focusing on Mariner's Way. That's a very underutilized area of town, and we're really trying to redevelop that to increase the tax base. How do you keep taxes from going up? You increase the tax base. And that is an area of town that we need to focus on redeveloping, and we are focusing on it in a very big way. I'll skip along here. Better management of town hall. We created the town's first handbook. Why is that important? The town had a bit of a nepotism problem. I don't know if any of you have noticed over the last 10 years, but we did, and we still kind of do, and that ends it.
And that ends it. Go ahead, I'll give you one more. Yeah,
one
go
more
ahead.
minute. We've also, in hiring, we haven't hired a lot of new employees, but when we've had to replace employees, we're doing it with panel interviews. We started with a finance director, we did it with IT, we did it with economic development, and we did it with the manager for the Water Pollution Control Commission, and we're 4 for 4. I'm not making the decisions. A panel is choosing the best candidates. And finally, environment. The preserve, we were able to secure the preserve, a 15-year battle, and I'm very proud of that. I think we have a great record to run on. Thank you very much for considering supporting Scott and I.
Great, thank you. Carol, are you too?
Yes.
Yeah. Carol Conklin currently serves as the Registrar of Voters here in town. She's also the chair of the Economic Development Commission and has served in the past as president of both the Main Street Business Association and proudly the Chamber of Commerce. Carol Conklin.
Thank you. Thank you for the Chamber for hosting this and everybody who's attending. First, I would just like to say, you'll have to give me the axe. Colin knows going door to door. I can talk for 2 hours about the town easily without getting tired from buying back to school clothes at Greenberg's and Craig Shoes and working at St. Gallen. I have a long history in the town. I have 3 points I'd like to go over this morning. One is the role of the selectman's position. I view that as a critical support piece to the first selectman, regardless of who gets in, and to support the municipality as a whole. Knowing it's a minor pay and that the Board of Selectmen does need to work other jobs typically, I still would like to advocate for a working Board of Selectmen, tap into our talents, give us all a project, let us implement and do new things in the areas of our specialty in the town. I'm happy to do that. I'm a project-oriented person where everybody is interacting with town boards, commissions, and the public. I think that's important as a reach out. The second area is from serving on boards and commissions. I would like to make sure all the time when the positions change every 2 years, everybody seated knows their role. They need to know their role. If they got on the board because they had a specific agenda and a specific target to somebody, it's not acceptable. They need to know their role. They need to know the bylaws of the board and commission. They need to know the overall mission of the commission. So that's something, I think we need to improve, and I'd be happy to work on that. My other age that I would like to address is a more interactive form of government with citizens and a younger generation, school-age parents. It's become a really busy world to working parents, weekend sports, and it's a shame we have to do this, but I think we really have to bring the town to the people. We can't rely on them to know and come to a town meeting. I would like to implement a little bit more of interacting with school-age parents, trying to get new volunteers and new positions. I think it's healthy. I think it breeds new talents, breeds new transparency, and engage them in the process. We know from being in the polling place who votes, who doesn't vote, and I think we just, on the Board of Selectmen, could support the first selectman with a more interactive role and getting more people, my age group, lower age group, involved in the process. In closing, I would like to say that if you know me as a project person or you've been on a committee with me, I pride myself on being a good team player. I pride myself on being a good communicator. And I do try to make my points and stand firm in a non-adversarial way. And I would ask for your vote for myself, Colin, and to be part of this process. Thank you very much.
Nice work. Thank you, Carol. I think it's you, Scott?
Yes.
Great. Scott Gigerich is also seeking his third term as selectman. He has served for 8 years on the Park and Recs Commission, and he is currently the principal of the Portland Middle School. Scott?
Good morning, everyone. I am pleased that you were all able to attend this event. 1 week prior to our election, the cornerstone of our American democracy is predicated on people exercising their right to vote. With a vote comes responsibility. Your attendance this morning will provide you with additional information and insight into each of our candidacies and should help to shape your vote. I am Scott Gigerich. I'm married to Joanne, a local school teacher. We celebrate our 25th anniversary in March. I'm a pretty lucky guy in that respect. I am equally proud of my 3 children who have been raised in the old Saybrook, attended our public schools, and are now in the next phase of their young adulthood. I was raised by Janet and Jack Gigerich, who instilled in me a desire to get involved. My mom and dad served as co-chairman of the local swim team, as lectors at church, as the chairman of the local YMCA, as the chairman of Trumbull's Volunteer Emergency Medical Service, and as active parents in the PTO. My dad taught me to be part of the solution, especially if I had questions. Personally, I attended UConn and graduated a degree in business education. I earned my master's in education at Saybrook University and a 6th-year certificate in educational leadership at Southern Connecticut State University. I worked for 14 years as a Spanish teacher, which included a phenomenal experience when my family and I spent a year in an exchange program in Spain. When I returned from Spain, I became a school administrator. I'm currently in my 10th year as principal at Portland Middle School, a 2014 National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. We've lived in Old Saybrook since 1993 and loved every single minute of it. I'm proud of our town, its reputation, its record of achievement, its school system, the Parks and Recreation Program, and so much more. Our town is great and great because of the many volunteers that we are fortunate to have and who similarly love this town. I have volunteered with families at the Community Co-op Nursery School, at the Goodwin Elementary School Father's Fun Fair, at the annual Healthy Youth, Healthy Community Variety Show fundraiser, with our local Little League, with our local soccer club on the Safe Grad Committee, as well as the Foreign Language and Elementary Schools Ad Hoc Committee. As the proud partner to Carl Fortuna Jr., the first selectman for our past 4 years, I ask that you continue to support both Carl and me. As an elected official with the Parks and Rec Department and with the Board of Selectmen, I've been involved with the splash pad at Trask Park, the playgrounds at Goodwin, the track at the middle school, the dugouts at Town Park, transforming a leaf dump into a pristine park, the renovation of mini golf, beach pass changes, and much more. Very controversial.
Send the meetings.
One area I've been connected with for many years is the identification of any space or land where we might create or house an athletic complex and or additional fields. In our history here, we've developed at least 2 pocket parks, the Ferry Road field and the Maple Ave field, and we've enhanced our high school facility tremendously. All 3 field projects have increased our capacity to practice or play on a variety of fields and surfaces. I was recently the co-chair of the 3T committee, which incorporated the voices of stakeholders, and that led to an upgraded tennis facility, a revitalized and refurbished track, and ultimately yielded a first-class, enviable turf field that will be cherished for the next 10 years or more for sure. My fellow citizens who care so dearly about this great town, I ask you for your continued support. Carl has been a visionary leader who has tackled challenging issues while maintaining the quality of life we've become accustomed to. Town Hall is being managed more efficiently. A new finance director has facilitated the progressive and futuristic approach to budgeting that Carl Fortuna pledged early in his tenure. Capital projects that have been on the to-do list for years have been addressed, including but not limited to a new police station, windows at the elementary school, a new roof on the middle school, and a commitment to fund our capital non-recurring fund at a level that will allow us to address emergencies and not need to ask for any new monies. The 1,000-acre preserve, which had been a topic for more than 20 years, is now a town asset forevermore. There's plenty more to brag about, including a mill rate that continues to be one of the 15, 16, 18 lowest in the state. On November 3rd, I ask that you elect Carl Fortuna Jr. and Scott Giegert to continue as the selectmen who have partnered to keep Old Saybrook's future bright. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Colin? Colin Heffernan is a local attorney here with a practice on Main Street. He is a member of the Zoning Commission and the Inland Wetlands Commission. He's a graduate of Cornell University and Tulane University School of Law. Colin?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I share the sentiments of everyone else who's spoken. Thank you very much for coming out today. This sort of civic involvement is exactly what the town needs. The 4 areas that I want to talk to you today are the 4 areas that I think the town really needs some improvement in some really fundamental ways. Those areas are transparency, accountability, fiscal responsibility, and political culture. With regard to transparency, I think that there are things that we need to be doing in order to inform the electorate about what is going on and let them know what's going on in time so that they can make their voice heard and to do something about it if they need to. If you take a look at many of the agendas and minutes that are posted on the website, you'll see that many of the agendas use purposely vague language that is incomprehensible to the average voter, and many of the minutes are delayed significantly. The single biggest offender in this regard is the police commission. And I don't pick on them simply because they are a hot topic, but they also are 27% of our municipal budget. If you take a look at their agendas, they're very difficult to tell what's going on, and their minutes are published months after the fact. So if you can't tell what's going on, and then you don't know what they did until months later, how can the citizens really have a say in what's happening or what's happening? Another area of transparency that we can improve on is that there's no reason why every major commission meeting cannot be videotaped and broadcast. Barry O'Neill, who's standing behind the camera today, has done a fantastic job videotaping police commission meetings, videotaping selectmen's meetings, videotaping Board of Finance meetings. But it shouldn't be up to people like Barry to ferret out this information. It should be up to the town to tell the people what they're doing and to solicit the people for feedback. Related to that, we also need a better and more robust social media and email presence. People need to know what's happening in the town in a way they can understand. An executive summary on a monthly basis as to what's happening in the boards and commissions is entirely appropriate and very easy to facilitate. Again, it shouldn't be up to the town people to figure out what's going on in town hall. It should be up to town hall to tell the people what's happening. With regard to accountability, we need more accountability in both our boards and commissions as well as our employees of the town. With regard to the boards and commissions, we have many of the boards and commissions in this town are doing an excellent job, and the volunteers are working very hard towards a goal. We have some where that just doesn't appear to be the case. Again, the most glaring offender in that regard happens to be the police commission. The police commission is charged with statute by promulgating regulations to govern the police department and to have general supervision and management of the department. We FOIA'd those regulations. They don't exist. They haven't existed. There has been nothing done to force the police commission to do its job, to manage the police department, to promulgate those regulations. We also have an issue with our town employees and accountability. We have a handbook, but we don't have any job descriptions. Unless we have a job description for a town employee, we'll never win a union grievance fight as to take action against them for not doing their job. If we can't say what their job is, then how do we tell them they're not doing it? That is a cornerstone of accountability, and we don't have it. Another area of accountability that we need with regard to our elected officials is some sort of recall or provision in our charter as to what can happen if someone can no longer do their job or isn't doing their job. We currently don't have that. So that if someone is unable to do their job in the town, and they're on the payroll, and they don't relinquish their position voluntarily, we don't have a mechanism in place to make that happen, and that's not serving the people of the town. With regard to fiscal responsibility, we need more attention to the line items of our budget to make sure that we're getting the best possible return of investment on every dollar that we spend for the town. We shouldn't let departments go shopping before they can go and explain to us why they want what they want, and to assure us that they're going to go after their goal in the most cost-efficient way possible. If you take a look at the 2014 budget, where you go amount budgeted versus amount spent, and you go line item by line item for those numbers, you'll find that over 40% of those line items came in over budget for that year. We need tighter controls on them. We need to make sure that we're looking at each line item, each department, and holding them accountable. The final item that I want to talk about is political culture. And this item is very important, and it's a new development that has happened while Carol and I have been knocking on doors since the year. We have received an alarming number of comments that people in this town are simply afraid to speak up if they disagree with what the town government is doing. We've heard it from older people, from younger people with children, from business owners, from big houses, from little houses, on the shore and out in the woods. People are afraid that if they speak up about what the town is doing, specifically with regard to the police chief and the police commission, that there will be reprisals. That needs to change. We need to make sure that people of this town know they can be involved in the government without having to look over their shoulder. There is no other possibly more important topic than that. Because if people feel that they can't be heard, then we don't have a democracy, and that needs to change. Thanks.
Wow, 2 seconds. Great, thank you. Hey, now it's time for some questions and answers. I'd like to open it up to the audience. Who has a question? Go ahead, Ted.
Part of the characteristics, or the characteristics that make this community special are its geography here on the river and the Sound, and its history, its long and illustrious history in Connecticut. How important do you think it is, and what steps might you take if elected to preserve the historic resources of this community? And I guess I would like to address that to the two candidates for first select.
Okay. Carl?
Well, we'll alternate.
Sure.
As we go forward. So, as you know, Ted, we started with that already, with a historic resource inventory, right? That's something that we applied for a grant. That was a lengthy process, I don't have to tell you. There was I had a meeting, this goes back 3 years ago, and it was with regard to, there's a historic home out by Ferry Road, and Ted and Ed Mosca and a few other folks came into my office after and said, why isn't Old Saybrook a certified local government? And I said, what's that? And we proceeded to make Old Saybrook a certified local government, which then allows us to seek grants such as the Historic Resources Inventory. The Historic Resources Inventory was completed. I'll be honest with you, it's definitely a 30,000-foot view. It doesn't look like it's that detailed. I was a little bit underwhelmed by the report, but it does follow up with a lot of recommendations. I think we need to look at next steps with regard to the historic resources inventory recommendations, and I think there were like 15 of them. There were quite a few. And because we are a certified local government, we can then apply for more grants to do that work. In addition to that, we may want to consider making the Historic District Commission a historical or a historic commission, not just a Historic District Commission. And that was one of the recommendations in the report. Obviously, I'm looking at Paul Connolly, that North Cove is the one historic district in this town. So there would have to be some discussions among the members of that historic district. But those are two things we can do. We have to follow up on the recommendations of the Historic Resources Inventory, and we have to consider changing the Historic District Commission to the Historic Commission.
Yeah, I completely agree. Old Saybrook's history is a vital part of this community. It's what makes the town attractive to visitors in summertime. It's what sort of builds on our character. In addition to the things that Carl just mentioned, another thing that we need to consider and keep doing is that when we do have proposed development in this town, commercial or retail or residential development in this town, we need to make sure that the people who are pushing for that development, pushing for that sort of work to be done, work with both our local historic stakeholders, the historical society, as well as the people that are in the know about what the historical resources are in the town, as well as bringing in the state archaeologists and the archaeologists up in Yukon to make sure that when we do have significant development in areas that could have historical significance, that we don't plow forward with the development without taking those into consideration. And that brings in both our government resources as well as putting the onus for putting the bill for those resources on the people that want to do the development in historically sensitive areas. So I think that we need to move the historical considerations into the package that we consider when we are permitting for ongoing development.
Thank you. This is a very quiet group today. I know it's early. There's got to be more questions out here.
Well,
Go ahead.
well, given the organization that's putting this debate on, if you want to call it a debate, one of the things we should talk about is how we set the environment in the town to make a business community that can be successful. And I think commenting on that would make sense
Sure.
here in this venue.
Holland, do you want to go first?
Sure. One of the things that we need to do to make a business community successful in this town is not only to be open to new businesses coming in, but we also have to be very careful when we do that not to harm the businesses that already exist here. And I think that that is an important consideration when we're talking about new developments such as Mariner's Way or other projects that are going on. If putting a new big box retailer out in Mariner's Way causes the Stop and Shop to close, we haven't gotten a net benefit. All we've done is added an asset at the periphery of town and shut something down in the middle of town. The same can be said for our local Main Street businesses. They already have enough competition from stores out of town that adding more competition is not always the best thing. I would hate to consider adding anything in this town that's going to shut down Saybrook Hardware, someone who's been a partner in this community for decades. So that's something we need to consider. Economic development doesn't only mean bringing in new business, it also means supporting the businesses that we have here. We also need to do a thorough job of bringing in all of those stakeholders from the local community, making sure that we're listening to businesses both through the chamber as well as through businesses that are outside of the chamber on all levels of our involvement. Just the other day at our zoning commission, we had a local business owner come in and talk to us about signing regulations. He was passionate, he was enthusiastic, he had things he wanted to see with regard to regulation and enforcement, and the zoning commission spent a good amount of time listening to him, working with him. Now we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at our sign regulations to try to see if we can incorporate some of that feedback. The best way to move forward and to make a healthy business environment is to make sure that business stakeholders know that they have an open door and an ear at town hall. Encourage them to come talk to us and then work towards implementing the feedback they're giving us. Business owners in this town know what's best for business in this town, and we should listen to them, and we should try to incorporate what they tell us into our policies and plans.
Great,
So-
thanks.
And one of the things I've done along those lines is, I do have an open door policy. If you come into town hall, my door is never shut, and if it is shut, it's a rare event, I can tell you that. One of the things I've done, especially with a lot of newer businesses coming into town or newer developments, I gather the fire marshal, the building inspector, zoning enforcement officer, economic development director, and we get in one room. And we did this with 75 Main Street, North Cove Outfitters, which, by the way, I got an email last week. They announced they're a major retail tenant coming in, very similar to North Cove Outfitters. Trailblazers Denali is going to come in. They signed up that lease. The owner told me that last week, so that is huge, great for Main Street. But what we do is we get everybody in a room so that Chris Costa or Don Dobson or Don Lucas can say, you know what, before you spend another dime on that building or doing something else, you should consider doing this because that won't fly or that's not going to happen. So we really tried to intercede early with business owners to make sure that they get the best advice from town hall so that they can be successful in their application to planning, zoning, or if necessary, the zoning board of appeals. In terms of, look, you know, you're right. If another big box retailer comes in, does it put someone else out of business? I try to look at a little bit of this as not a zero-sum game and more expanding the pie. It'd be great if that were happening in Connecticut, and I've had a lot of people say to me, you know, what's wrong with Connecticut? Old Saybrook is perfectly positioned on the shoreline. Route 9, railroad, I-95. Why isn't more business jumping to come here? It's a Connecticut problem. You know, I was looking at the other day for retirees. You know where Connecticut ranks for retirees? Not 50th, 51st, behind Puerto Rico or DC. We're losing population. So it'd be nice to see state policies bringing more population, more young people in, so that we can expand the pie. And we don't think of bringing in business as a zero-sum game where we're going to put something here, it's going to knock something else out of business. Hopefully, Old Saybrook can be that place where, hey, it's a destination, more people want to come here. You need to have a safe community, and you need to have, whether you want retail or industrial, you need to have a lower mill rate. And we have that. And that is attractive, whether you like it or not, it is attractive to businesses to come here knowing that they're going to get taxed at 18.5 and not 32.5 on their personal property. So those are just some of the things we've done. You got to have a good infrastructure. You know, I'm very excited next year about these 200 parking spaces that are going in at the train station. We are going to rebuild North Main Street with a $1 million federal grant that we've been working 12 years to get, and it's finally being implemented next year. And I really think that's going to be a gateway to Main Street. I think Main Street to North Main Street, right to the train station, is going to be an entirely different economy unto itself, and I think it's going to be really thriving. And getting back, there's historical resources, as we know, in the cemetery, and we did have this. I walked that property with the state archaeologist. I'm forgetting his name. What's his name?
I know. I can't.
Antonio or something. D'Antonio is the guy's name. And I walked it to make sure there were no unseen graves outside of the fenced-in area. That's something that developer with the apartment units is going to have to be very cognizant of and very careful of in terms of protecting that very important town resource, which is that cemetery. So,
Thank you.
I don't know if we want to involve,
Yeah.
you know.
Do you mind if I
No,
comment?
please, go ahead.
Economic development
You guys
standpoint.
do too.
So, a little bit of education from the economic development standpoint is that we had a consultant a few years ago, and the determination in a healthy town this size is that you are about 70% most relying on taxes from residential and 30% commercial. And right now we're about 80% residential, 20% commercial. So our job on economic development is multifaceted. It's to say more business needs to come. We can't necessarily control the type of business that comes. We can set the groundwork, which what Mariner's Way is trying to do is set the groundwork for a theme to make it attractive for certain types of businesses to come. But we actually can't make that final decision of who takes on that property that the developer's paying taxes on. The other thing is going to historical information, going to the preserve. The role to grow the town, make the town a very attractive place is to bring in visitors, not your typical tourist who's going to go on bumper cars. It's to do up and coming ecotourism. The preserve is great for ecotourism, bringing people here to do trails. Hopefully they're going to come into town, have lunch, do a little shopping. And to incorporate what the Historical Society is trying to do, bring people here for tours and for research and to value what's here. So I think the role with the selectmen, First Selectmen, Board of Selectmen, Economic Development Commission, to Bob Fish's point, is to incorporate all those pieces.
Great, thank you. Next. Go ahead, Vin.
First of all, I think it's a great forum we're seeing today, and I really appreciate everybody, you guys putting this on for us. And it's been very informative. I've heard a lot of great things on both sides. My question is this, to both parties. Given all the issues out there we discussed here today, I'm just curious, number one paramount issue that you would see as the number one priority of taking care of in the next 2 years, what would that one paramount issue be if there was one that you could accomplish?
Carl?
Look, probably the issue that I've touched the most in the last 4 years and will continue to touch the most, assuming I'm elected next Tuesday, is the wastewater management district project, WPCA project. Working very hard on that. And I know it's well, maybe it's not a sexy topic. It may be a little bit more controversial a topic, but this is something that was put in place. Basically, the new systems or the septic systems started going in the ground the day I took office. That was something that had been worked on for 20 years. I served on the WPCA briefly before going on the Board of Finance. It is a difficult and complex issue. I've also been knocking on a few doors, and sometimes I'm wary to go south of Route 1 because I know I'm going to hear it. And whether it's, a lawn that wasn't seeded properly, or a septic system where hasn't been implemented yet, and people are wondering what's going on. That is a very big issue, and we are over the next 2 years at the crux of it. We're getting a lot of heat from the state. This program is supposed to be finished in 2019. Most of the easy properties are being addressed right now. We're going to have about 700-800 done by the end of next year. The next 400 or 500, Cornfield Point, Indian Town, Chocolate Beach, Saybrook Manor, are the difficult properties. And we have to determine what we're doing, and we're working every day on that. And in terms of the biggest town issue that is on the table for the next 2 to 4 years, we can all talk about managing budgets, and that's very important. Keeping the mill rate low is very important. Keeping the police commission and the police department on task is very important. I'm not saying it isn't, but we have a $43 million capital project that we're in the middle of, and that is very critical for this town and our future.
Thank you.
Thanks. For me, it is getting the police commission back on track and getting the police, particularly the police chief, back on track with what his role is in the town. Right now, my feeling is that we have a police commission that is not doing its job to manage and supervise the department and its equipment. I think that we have a police commission that is not fulfilling the statutory obligations to promulgate regulations, and I think that we have a police commission that has largely abdicated all of its authority to an unelected police chief who has been signed up to a contract that does not have a termination date or a review period. And I think that there is a negative energy coming from that situation that is pervading the town's own opinions as to the roots of its own democracy. And I think that before we can move forward addressing any other issues, people need to feel safe to engage in the public sphere so that we can have as much input as we can. I don't think we have that right now. I think that we need to reform it, and I think that we need to get it back on track by any means necessary.
So I'll echo Colin's sentiments that the police commission and the Department of Police Services has received an awful lot of attention in the recent past. I think it's important for us to be present at as many meetings as possible to know what's going on, and that's one of the things that we've done over our tenure in town. Is I've been at a good number of police commission meetings. I've had conversations with the chief of police and commissioners on that police commission. There are certain things that we are able to control and things that we cannot control, and I think the presence, and the chief uses the term omnipresence, the fact that we're at meetings will help to put some pressure on all of the key people in that commission and the chief of police himself to act the way that the townspeople seem to want him to act. you're not going to get rid of the chief of police. In East Hampton, which is the town next to where I work in Portland, they had some concern with their chief of police and went through an awful lot of political manipulations behind the scenes where the chief of police was let go and then brought back, and it cost the town $1 million. All right, so it's not anything that I think that we're interested in doing other than sharing the concern that a good number of people have had, and that concern has been growing over the 4 years that we've been in office, and that is that we need fiscal responsibility on that police, Department of Police Services. We need them to be constrained with regard to some of their spendings and to be considerate of the concerns that the people in this town have voiced and voiced vociferously.
Carol, do you want to comment?
Yes, I always like to comment. Again, I'll go back to, from an economic development standpoint, the two topics are really significant because WPCA, we get business feedback. People say, why don't we get a Trader Joe's? Why don't we get this? Why don't we get that? The business feedback, a lot of times, is a septic issue. Some of these businesses are in towns where there's sewers. So they're used to sewers. They come in with their real estate developer. They do their thing. They're not used to the septic issues. So until those are on a smooth track, you risk development of what people want. That's my first point. My second point is with regard to the police, it trickles down to economic development. The town has a reputation issue. When I hear from friends who live in Essex, I don't like to go all the way down Route 1 anymore and go to Sal's Pizza because there's always cops and my husband and I are afraid to have a glass of wine. So, you know, we have to get the whole situation under control of the budget, the amount of people, where they are, how the police commission is running it, and, you know, controlling the budget, controlling the aspects of it. So those are my 2 comments.
Can I just follow up with a comment? So, I moved to town in 1994. In 1994, when I moved in, I was warned, be careful in Old Saybrook, there's way too many cops. I think that's 21 years ago. This has been, now what, I'm not saying there are too many cops, or too few cops, or the right amount of cops. That's what it's been. In fact, they've had 28, and they've had 22. Right now, they're at 25 full-time certified. That's what they've been. That's been the reputation under this chief. I mean, Carol, you know that probably. And Scott, you've been in town. How long have you been in town?
Summer since the 80s, lived here full-time since that late.
So, I mean, this is something that we as a town have heard, and people have been here for 40 years, I'm sure, have heard this for ever and ever and ever. So, it's a follow-up comment.
Great. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Go ahead, Dottie.
Well, I'd like to address it to both the selectmen candidates. Since the police chief has already been allowed to get out of control, I'd like to know how you feel about his position as police chief and emergency management person.
Go ahead, Colin.
I think that examining breaking up that relationship is a good idea. I think that if you consolidate too much authority into one person in any town, especially when that person's contract doesn't allow for a review period and requires the political will of 4 members of the police commission to take any action against him, that the more power you put into that singular entity, the more dangerous that it is. So I understand that one of the chief's particular talents is emergency management. That being said, he's not the only person in this town that can take that role on. And I think that focusing that much authority into one person is a dangerous thing. And I think that danger has manifested itself in a couple of ways. We've already had an issue where that affected the police chief earning overtime for a year, earning a considerable amount of money on the Times nickel, acting as both emergency management and as chief of police. And there's also an inherent conflict of interest there. When we have an emergency in this town, a blizzard, a hurricane, something, those are what we generally face in this town. That's not a law enforcement situation. And to have the needs of law enforcement running, a person who's responsible for law enforcement in the town, also manage the emergency response, those two mindsets could be opposed. And then you have an internal conflict where the chief of police might say, well, I think we need a law enforcement presence here, whereas in his emergency management capacity, he might say, well, I actually think we need manpower over here. And to have that unity creates an internal conflict that I think would be better addressed by having a separate emergency management manager who could make that decision in those crucial times. The police department and the police chief can have a role during an emergency. Of course they do, they have the knowledge, they have training, they have manpower, but there's a reason why those are distinct roles. And I think that we should examine whether it makes sense to break those roles up.
Traditionally, it's been unified, and I think the current chief has just assumed that. It is a particular strength, if you want to call it that, that he, in a hurricane or when a state of emergency is declared by the state of Connecticut, he does tend to do a pretty good job and take charge. Could it be explored to separate the two? It's been mentioned, and it could be, there's no doubt. I believe the stipend for emergency management, I want to say it's $6,000, $8,000. You know, query what kind of talent you're going to find for that. So are we interested in creating a $35,000 position to separate it out, or, you know, what are you going to get for $8,000? I guess that would be my concern. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think it could happen. The conflict issue has been raised before. Thankfully, it happens rarely. And in terms of the police chief also being the emergency manager under a state of emergency, he also is the keeper of the records in a state of emergency, and that is helpful when federal emergency management money becomes available to the town. We were just able to put back in the town's coffers almost $600,000 from Tropical Storm Sandy as a result of the chief's ability to keep those records and apply to federal emergency management for those reimbursement funds. That's $600,000 that the town did spend, that the town then got back as a result of that one person being in that role. Now, could someone else do that? Let me tell you what other towns do. Other towns hire consultants to do it, and those consultants take a piece of the money that they get from the feds. So, you know, maybe on 600,000 we lose 60. That's not the end of the world, but, you know, it's a topic that could be discussed, sure.
But we don't know, because he's not made accountable for his salary in that position, how much we are spending. We have no idea, because he's not made to account for his overtime and his salary.
Yeah, and I'm going to give you a bad answer, and I'll say it in advance. I mean, the overtime he gets is federal dollars, they're not local tax dollars, and that's a bad answer. Everybody's like, oh, it's our tax dollars, and you're right. But he's not getting overtime on local tax dollars. It's federal tax dollars, but they're all the same. I pay taxes, you pay taxes.
Okay, go ahead, Heather.
Hi. One question or comment that I have is I'd be concerned with a candidate who's running with such a narrow focus as taking on the police department, so that's separate. As a department head myself, my question would be, what kind of plans do you have to invest in youth programming or substance abuse prevention? My issue with the police is really around catching someone who has 180 bags of heroin in a local hotel, rather than stopping someone up if they've had a glass of wine. So I think our police presence is very important, but I also think our youth presence and bringing young families into the community is very important. But having an infrastructure that helps support healthy development of kids is something that I'm very interested in. I'd like to know if you have a focus on that.
I don't know if I'll let these guys do
Yep.
that also.
Let me jump in on that.
Yeah.
The synergy between the town and the public schools and the youth and family services is one of the cornerstones, one of the successes of our town to date. You've had a good number of forums going way back to, I think, the late 80s or early 90s, where you've been talking about these surveys where you're asking kids what's happening in town and families what's happening in town, and you're bringing key stakeholders together over a good period of time to develop assets, to concern ourselves with how we as a whole community can work together to concern ourselves with youth making poor choices. And so the objective has been that this town has worked with the school board in concert on a regular basis to support programs in the school, support youth and family services, and provide opportunities for people to get together and use the collective strength of the good number of us in order to reach out and, I guess, intervene as early as possible. Well, that's what I say.
Yeah, the youth aspect of the town is extremely important to me. My daughter's going to enter Old Saybrook High School next year. Heather and I have had conversations about youth in town development, and I think it's very important to engage them and their parents into the community so they feel an active part of the community. They understand on their level decisions being made. You want them to hopefully come back and live here someday, so you want them to feel a sense of ownership to the community. So I view it as a high importance to support the youth and family department.
I agree. I've got a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old. The 5-year-old just started kindergarten. So the youth and family services and outreach there, I think, is incredibly important. I also think we are never going to be able to police away the drug problems we have among you kids in this country. If that was successful, it would have been successful by now. I think that what we need to do is look at where we can apply more resources into identifying which teens are at risk and which kids need some more attention and what sort of positive impact we can have on them and developing solutions on that front. I admire the police for taking the effort that they have in sort of trying to confront the problem, but the law enforcement solution isn't going to work. It never has. I think that addressing the teenagers and the kids that are at risk and letting them know that there's a better path and giving them all the support they need, that's the way we need to go. And if we need to divert resources from other areas to get to that, in light of the recent deaths that we've had, I think it is absolutely imperative that we do so. Like I said, I have young kids. My wife was a teacher for 10 years and currently works for Teach for America. We need the kids in this town to want to come back to this town. We need the kids in this town to navigate the problems that they're going to face in their adolescence. But we don't need to do it with more police presence. We need to do it with more caring and understanding.
Well, you just want to comment and we'll wrap up?
I'll be very quick. First of all, I'm very happy that Colin's child is going to experience the new windows at the Goodwin School. You know, one of the things we can do is, and this is a national discussion, and dovetailing on what Colin just said, putting more money into youth and family services and mental health issues to address the problem before it becomes more serious. And I think that is primary because that's where you cut off the police presence coming into a child's life. I you know, Heather, and I'll call you by first name, Heather, you know, I've been very supportive of youth and family services because I know how busy you guys are and I know what good work you guys do over there. And by the way, that's not a partisan statement because the Board of Finance almost unanimously has been very supportive of youth and family services also.
Great, thank you. I want to thank you all. We touched on a variety of topics, excellent questions. I want to give each candidate a minute just to wrap up. Carl, you want to start?
Sure. Based on what you've heard today, look, it's running a town. There's going to be issues. There's going to be hot button issues every year. I've learned that. The budget itself is usually a hot button issue, but we are looking at declining debt in this town. Our budget increases are very modest. And in fact, we are reallocating a lot of resources where we can see, 4 years ago when I came in, there was no such thing as actuals presented to the public. With a new finance director, speaking of transparency, the Board of Finance is getting a budget document that is the most transparent document that one could possibly get with regard to costs and expenses and 3-year prior tracking expenses. So we know where that budget's going, we know where it's been. We have been very transparent and very open in our town meetings. I bring more items to the Board of Finance than they want to know about, I think. Thankfully, the Barry is videotaping. I have had discussions with our IT person to get a system in there to videotape town hall meetings, and that is going to happen. I know I've been promising that for a little bit, but that is on the agenda to get done. Scott and I, we've done a lot of work, good work with Steve Gernhardt. Our infrastructure is complete. The only capital project remaining is the WPCA project. So we're looking at declining debt and very responsible budgets. The town is in great fiscal shape. There's always issues, and we will continue to address them as they come up. So.
Thank you. Carol, you too?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, so I would welcome your support November 3rd. I do look at the town globally. I look at the mill rate as good, but it's a trend, and from economic development also, and from having a child, you don't want the trend to always be increasing because you have higher home prices in the town. So with higher home prices, you want to keep the mill rate low and attractive to business to make us unique and not just another town in the state of Connecticut. And I'm very much in support of the youth programs. I'm very supportive of the volunteers on our boards and commissions. And what concerns me is that when you recruit new volunteers, you want them to understand their role on a board or commission. People sit at meetings till 10 o'clock at night, and they don't want to read their name in the paper the next day that, you know, the commission didn't have the right agenda item, they had an improper vote, they had this problem, that problem. No one wants to volunteer and see that the next day. So I'd like to just create a more positive approach to some of these problems.
Great. Thanks. Scott?
So I'm asking all of you, and appreciate that you've come to this forum to see a little bit about all of us, for your support for both Carl and I. We're running on a record of accomplishment. It's been positive throughout all of the 4 years that Carl's been the first selectman. He's named bipartisan committees to address the big projects that we've had. Each time those bipartisan committees have brought projects to us, which we brought to the town, and the town has voted for each of those projects overwhelmingly. We've been progressive in these 4 years, thinking about the future, planning for the future, putting more money in the rainy day fund. And we've obviously been productive. We've gotten major projects completed and begun and completed in the 4 years that Carl has been the first selectman. These are major capital projects which you've heard about a good number of times today, including the acquisition of the 1,000-acre preserve. So it has been a great 4 years under Carl's leadership, and I'm urging you to continue to support this team as we move forward to make Old Sabrook's future bright.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Colin.
I'd just like to, as the last speaker, to thank everyone for coming out today. It is fantastic to see the sort of turnout. The questions have been excellent, and that is really what we need a lot of in this town, both from the citizens coming to the people in town government, asking hard questions, demanding hard answers, and that's also what we need within town government. We need checks and balances. We need different voices. Getting a unanimous decision isn't as important as getting the right decision. And I think that we've had, I'm asking for your support, your vote for Carol and I. We have had national politics aside, we've had Republicans in charge of town hall for going on around 25 years at this point. I think that over that time, we've got an erosion of our checks and balances. I don't think we have enough different voices and enough challenging to the way we're doing things. And I think that by bringing in some new blood and bringing in a change of philosophy as to how to address some of the major issues facing the town, we can get better results for the taxpayer, and that's what it's all about. So thanks again for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.